There you go. 4-punch, 5-punch, 6-punch combination. Body shot, bang, 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 bang.
Telling him not to counterpunch.
Boom! Will Rackman get up?
Iron is going through all the instructions. This is for the championship of the world. I expect a tough, clean fight. Protect yourself at all times. Any questions from the challenger?
Welcome back, fight fans, to the Fight City Podcast, the official podcast of thefightcity.com. I am your host, Jeff Foose, and today I am joined with Hunter Breckenridge as we dive into the weekend that was. Now, for the record, I'd like for everyone to know Hunter Breckenridge is our in-house heavyweight expert. So thank you for joining me today, Hunter.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be doing this.
Well, considering that this is the weekend that was, and obviously there was a huge fight that happened this weekend, but for those of you who do not know, in Kingdom Arena in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, this past Saturday, Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk met to determine who was the undisputed heavyweight king. There hasn't been an undisputed heavyweight champion since Lennox Lewis defeated Evander Holyfield in a rematch of all-time greats in November of 1999 in Las Vegas. Usyk, holding the WBA, IBF, and WBO belts, seized Fury's WBC title, thereby securing the distinction of being the inaugural undisputed heavyweight champion. Furthermore, he ascended to the position of lineal heavyweight champion, a mantle previously held by Fury since 2015 after surprising triumph over Usyk's compatriot, Vladimir Klitschko. Usyk is also the only second boxer to have held the undisputed champion at cruiserweight and now at heavyweight. So, Hunter, did the match live up to the hype?
Yeah, this is one of those fights that there definitely was a decent amount of hype, especially in boxing circles, and I think this is a fight that it was a good, solid fight. I don't think anybody would put it on the list of the all-time greats. Like a Holyfield Bowe, or for that matter, Holyfield Bowe too, or one of those really big fights that captures the public's imagination. At this point, I don't think boxing, and especially in like the North America, the U.S., that kind of thing, really does capture the public's imagination much anymore, especially at heavyweight. But I'll say this was a good, solid fight. It was really high level. These were both men were very skilled fighters. Both adapted throughout the fight. The fight started pretty close. Usyk maybe had a bit of an edge in the first 3 rounds or so, or it was very competitive. Then it seemed like Fury was able to start taking over, landing a lot to the body, especially for a much taller man. It was quite impressive. Catching Usyk coming in with those uppercuts, and then Usyk kind of took over again, starting really in the 7th and with that huge 9th round, and he just took over. He adjusted and started outworking Fury, but Fury never, other than that 9th round, Fury was never really out of it, and kept it competitive. I think he might have shaded the last round, and yeah, it was I wouldn't put it as an all-time great fight, but it was a very good fight, especially considering the stakes. So that's where I come at it.
Yeah, I'd say that's a really good summary of the fight as a whole. The judges scored it. One judge scored it 114 to 113 for Fury, but they were overruled by scores of 114 to 113, and then another scorecard of 115 to 112 for Usyk. What did you think of the opening couple of rounds? There was one point where Fury's antics, we're on full display, holding on to the ropes and putting his head out there and then kind of flicking out some jabs while still holding on to the ropes. But clearly, as the fight wore on, I think those antics, he was like, I probably need to stop doing this and probably get serious, because Usyk is a man on a mission. The determination he was pushing the bigger guy back. Usyk was, right? Like Fury was boxing on the back foot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Usyk was, he was pressuring him, and he was using very intelligent pressure. They both went to the body well. Usyk almost more out of necessity because of the physical differences. But yeah, I think Usyk he was definitely making the fight. He was definitely taking it to Fury. Fury was responding pretty well for the most part, but yeah, it was Fury's showmanship, which, your mileage may vary how entertaining you find it, but I would say that and obviously Usyk didn't find it all that entertaining, and he himself can be a pretty charismatic guy, but in the ring he was definitely all business, and I think Fury realized he had to take the fight more seriously. It didn't take long for that. So
I got to say, I really appreciated Usyk's, I think, tenacity starting in the 8th round, right? starting right then, I noticed Usyk coming out, and then his the volume of punches, right, and then changing of the levels really just stood out for someone in my mind starting in that round specifically, and that's when you see this shift, especially right whenever Usyk's landing a right punch, busting up Fury's nose, and then another right punch hurting Fury's right eye. And then obviously we all do remember the ninth round, Usyk landing 14 punches.
Yeah.
And then several overhand lefts, and then Fury wobbling and stumbling. I keep seeing memes right now on the internet of Fury just kind of leaning back on the ropes, kind of like this is at the moment where he knew he messed up. All right, I was just considering like seeing all of those adjustments up until the eighth. Usyk's corner clearly giving him perfect, and mind you, of course, Usyk, his intelligence and ring generalship, right? It's like even himself, he's probably recognizing. I know I hate the term downloading information because they keep using it for him and Lomachenko.
Yeah.
But clearly that shift kicking up into like the next gear in the eighth, starting in the eighth, right? To edge out. Mind you, the final round, I guess Fury would have won that final round, but definitely the ninth round being, I would say, essentially the turning point of that fight.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree with you about the phrase downloading, but he definitely, the very best fighters, they are able to find that extra gear. They're able to, analyze and pay attention to what's happening in front of them. Fury himself was able to kind of take over a bit in the middle rounds, but then, Usyk then was able to start countering that, and really just up his work rate. And as you said, he was mixing up levels. That flurry that had Fury going, that was. Yeah, it was something like, I think it was 14 shots is what everyone's saying landed, and it was brutal to watch. It was entertaining. The fact that Fury didn't go completely down, I know it was eventually ruled a knockdown, and I've seen a little bit of grumbling online. I've seen some people complaining on Twitter that the fight should have been stopped at that point. I think that's a situation where the referee has to make a judgment. If you're pushed and backed into the ropes, it's again, do the ropes hold you up or not? I think that final point where he fell into the ropes and the referee did start counting, I think that was pretty clear that could have been a knockdown. Before that, he was bouncing around. He kind of moves in an awkward way anyway, especially if he's getting wobbled. I don't necessarily think he was in the verge of getting knocked down before that. So, and it takes 3 steps for him to cross the ring anyway. So bouncing up against the ropes doesn't necessarily mean he's about to fall. So I don't know. I think the ref generally made the right call. It's easy in hindsight to say that, that he should have been stopped. That was too far. And I don't know. I do think that Usyk definitely really showed his class and, as you said, his tenacity in that case, in that round especially. And Fury just he had to tough it out, and he couldn't really do much else besides take that beating for the rest of that round.
I agree. I'm glad that the ref did not stop that fight right there in that moment. Of course, like you said, in hindsight, right, it's 2020 vision, but it gives the fans, the full opportunity to see if, and especially considering that Fury has like remarkable recovery power. Right?
Absolutely.
And so then it obviously allowed us to have the full 12-round experience versus, hey, did we cut it short? Knowing that Fury has that recuperative ability. And then, of course, the referee, right? The whole fight becomes about the referee and the stoppage. Definitely. And was it a good call? Was it a bad call? I will say Lennox Lewis, the previous undisputed heavyweight champion, he had some thoughts on Fury's performance. And I'm going to quote him here. Fury was boxing like he won the fight. No boxer can judge and say they won the fight. And every time a round was close, they should look at it like a loss. Now, mind you, this was kind of in response to Fury's post-fight comments regarding the loss to Usyk. Hunter, do you have any thoughts on does that tarnish, I guess, like Fury's reputation, or does it kind of just blend in with everything else that he's always said in the past?
I think the latter. I would say that Fury, everybody who pays any attention to the current heavyweight division knows Fury is a talker. He's a loudmouth. He says what's on his mind, and sometimes things that may not even be on his mind. And especially, I tend to want to give a little grace to a fighter who just spent 45 minutes getting punched in the head repeatedly for things they said, unless it's completely out of bounds or completely evil or something. It's hard for me to really overanalyze an emotional person who just took their first loss, just got, yeah, as I said, just repeatedly took punches to the skull. And Fury's the type of person who would say something ridiculous, a week later too, when his head is cleared. So but that almost makes me again just add to the, as you said, it kind of blends in with the cacophony that is whatever the mind of Tyson Fury. It doesn't really bother me that much based on everything else. Again, I think he's a fantastic fighter in a lot of ways. He's also kind of a ridiculous person. So, and I think he also, again, he's a showman, and he sometimes likes to say shocking and provocative things too. So throw that on top of it. So no, it doesn't really tarnish much, not to me.
Right. Sometimes I see these in-ring post-fight conferences, and I'm like, are people going to remember this part, or are they going to remember the experience that we all just collectively witnessed? And I think it's going to be the former, right? No one really remembers the post-fight, I guess, comments, but I'm always curious about what others think when Fury does get a microphone. I don't know if I prefer him saying something or if I would rather him sing a song. But looking I guess, because this was such a massive fight, right? Looking up for the undisputed title, for the heavyweight, the heavyweight division, the money-making division, if you will. I am very curious, Hunter, to see your thoughts on undisputed heavyweight champions. What type of criteria should be used to determine undisputed heavyweight champion? Do you even think we should have these type of titles? For example, just today, I was just reading about Usyk will apparently lose his undisputed status in the next couple of weeks due to him focusing on that rematch with Fury later in October, rather than facing his IBF mandatory Filip Hrgovic. Hrgovic will be facing Daniel Dubois for the IBF title in June.
Yeah, I think a lot of it really depends on how much stock you place in the various sanctioning body, the alphabet soup belts. It's, on one hand, yes, it definitely, you have to be a fighter of at least some skill, generally in most cases what you'd call world class, top 20, 30, 40 in the world in a weight class to get one of the belts, and to get multiple belts. It's not nothing. But it's very rare that whoever is a champion in one specific for the WBC, IBF, any of them, is necessarily the best fighter in the division. There's something a little arbitrary about when we're basing everything, especially in the current era, as the belts proliferate. Now we're in the quote 4-belt era. We put a lot of stock in accumulating those belts, and it's not completely worthless, but it's also, I think we focus a little too much on it. I'm a huge proponent of the concept of the lineal champion, and even then, the lineal champion isn't always the very best, but at the very least, they're the person who beat the person who beat the person, and sometimes the best doesn't. Sometimes an underdog can snag that championship for a little while, but then that's, at least you can say it's earned. And if they finally lose or retire or whatnot, either lineage starts over or gets replaced by someone better. But I'd rather, acknowledge Shannon Briggs, 6-7 months as a somewhat undeserved lineal champion than worry too much about if Oleksandr Usyk has 4 belts right now, or has to drop one in 2 weeks, or Lennox Lewis had 3 belts, or Vladimir Klitschko, before he lost, had all but, I think, the WBC belt, for example. The only reason why I didn't have that was because that was essentially his brother's designated belt, So he was almost undisputed by that. So undisputed, it meant a little more when, back when the quote sanctioning bodies were the NYSAC and the NBA. Nobody really paid attention to those as much. It was still, you generally had the heavyweight champion, and they usually had both in most cases. And then when the WBA and WBC kind of took over in the 60s, that there was some dispute, but generally the champion had both, and nobody really cared too much. For me, I care more about the fact that Tyson Fury was, as far as I was concerned, the lineal champion, and now Usyk beat him, so Usyk now has that and is that's what I'm focusing on rather than the belts themselves. Because as you said, the IBF's about to strip them in 2 weeks. The belts come and go. The belts are almost ephemeral compared to the actual championship. And these days, I think we're better about acknowledging who the man is.
Right. I really like your thoughts on that. I was trying to do some reading earlier today before this call and just looking at the variety, I guess, of eras in terms of, like, you touched upon it, the NABAF, the NYSAC, New York State Athletic Commission, and then WBA, WBC era. And then I kept trying to figure out, I was like, when did we care that the WBO got involved, right? Because they were originally formed in the 80s, but they were really for Puerto Rican fighters at one point. And then it was like, 2007, like the other sanctioning bodies like care that it's around and officially recognize them. And so I was like, there's obviously money involved into this, because obviously you have sanctioning fees. And then it becomes this like club, if you will, of, will we recognize you? For example, I guess like the IBO. Like, do we really care if the IBO is like, you have an IBO title? Many people are like, who cares? What does that even mean? And so looking across all that, I was trying to make sense of it. And I'm a person who is following the sport, so I can only imagine someone who doesn't very closely follow the sport trying to make sense of, well, they have this belt. Are they a unified champion or are they undisputed? Oh, well, no, they're only a single belt champion. They have the WBC. And then don't even get me started on the franchise champions situation with the WBC itself. I guess moving forward, but it still ties upon it. How important is it to have an undisputed heavyweight champion for the sport of boxing? Do you think it really matters?
I think it matters in as much as people hype it up. I think that a lot of this is really just based on, I say public perception, and the more people talk about it mattering, the more it kind of does matter. If we focus on, the lineal championship or the ring or the Transnational Boxing Ratings Board or what have you, if we focus a little more on those and focus more on concepts like lineage, a lot of it's what we make it. It matters a little bit for me, and I'm just one person and with not necessarily a huge voice in this world, but I can say that for me, I don't really care that Usyk is currently a 4-belt champion and for 5 if you count the ring, and now about to be 4-3 again because he's about to lose the IBF. He's the new champion. He's a lineal champ, and that's where I'm paying attention to it. But as far as the proliferation of these belts also does keep more casual fans, I think it keeps them kind of confused. And, well, who's the champion? I hear the word undisputed, but what does that really mean? As far as you said, the WBO is relatively new in terms of how well it's recognized. But I remember in the 90s when it was treated as kind of like a junior championship. You had someone like, Ray Mercer had it for a while, and as a guy who was like 4th or 5th in the weight class for most of that decade, that was about right for him. Or Tommy Morrison had it for a while, that kind of thing. It was. And then I think it was around the time actually at heavyweights that it was, I think Klitschko captured it from, it might have been a Bragomov or someone, but and he added it to his collection, and everyone just started around that time and kind of 2006, 7, 8 in that range. All of a sudden, okay, it's one of the major belts now. Okay, cool, I guess. Does that do we all think that anyone who doesn't have, does that mean we don't know who the real champ is? So I'd rather focus on the lineage, but that's some people ignore that. Some people don't care. I think that's not always an easy sell. So,
right. I guess the reason why I asked that question is because the fans who, they just tune into ESPN, they get their morning news or whatever. I mean, this morning was great. As soon as you typed in Usyk Fury and you just click on the news tab on Google, 1,000 different articles are popping up. We're looking at New York Times, even smaller news publications like the one from Louisville that I caught my attention. Everyone was posting. Even NPR had an article about this. That was one of the top 5 that I saw. And I was like, NPR, when do they really? I mean, they have their sports division, but like how in reality, how big is that? And I was like, all right, this is a news headline, right? This is going to capture the attention. It's for all the belts. It's for undisputed title and the lineage in itself. But does it help? I guess the reason why I'm asking this question was, do you think it helps grow interest and popularity in the sport, or is it unnecessary considering that we are now, and Mike Tyson, please don't show up to my house and beat me up. Because now we get Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, like type of gimmick fights or exhibition fights, whatever you want to call them, that are also drawing eyes to the sport for like a younger audience, or even just not even younger, just newer fans that are catching it for the first time due to streaming services.
I think if you can win the undisputed title, if you can capture all the belts, then yeah, it can help because it does get that media attention. I have a Google search up and I've got BBC, CNN, Fox, Yahoo Sports, CBS, so The Guardian, you said New York Times, NPR, there it is, Financial Times. So yeah, that's cool. And the word undisputed certainly has a sort of cachet, even outside of the regular boxing media. But it's, again, as the sanctioning bodies do what they always do and start stripping for no reason and all that, it kind of fades. It's great when it happens, and that's really cool, and I'm glad it created this extra attention. It's a fleeting thing, so I don't know how much it means in the long term. And again, even if it was just for the lineal title, and again, if there were no belts in the line, but it was the same fight, it would be for the lineal title, and that'd be great. But yeah, it would get probably a little less attention because people do look at those very shiny, very gaudy looking belts and straps that people drape over themselves after they win, and that's part of boxing, and a lot of non-boxing fans will note that before they note anything else. It's not bad for the sport in the short run. It's good for the immediate attention. I don't think it's necessarily good in the long run, though. And again, at some point very soon, there's going to be a new IBF champion, and that's going to get reported in a smaller scale, but it'll get reported. New heavyweight champion, Daniel Dubois, or whomever, or whatever. But he's not. But he did get a belt, so I guess you have to count it if you really care about these things. So. And then another belt will presumably get stripped at some point, and because these sanctioning bodies really don't care, if they really care, if they cared about unified champions, it wouldn't be such a big deal. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Money and all that aspect comes into it. Right. Which is a whole other, you could write books and volumes on books on the sanctioning bodies and the fees that they require on top of the backdoor dealings. Now with this win though for Usyk, since you're our in-house heavyweight expert, Hunter, where does this win place Usyk on your all-time heavyweight list?
Oh, what a
does
title.
He even break the top 10? Does he break the top 10?
Not even close. No, I love Usyk. I think he's a fantastic fighter, especially including his run at cruiserweight. He's definitely put together an excellent career, but to crack the top 10, especially at heavyweight, you need more volume, and quality matters. It's not just quantity over quality, or the two things, but you need both. And at this point, he now has 4 wins over top 10 heavyweights, and that's great, but that's like that by itself doesn't crack the top 100, much less the top 10. I think he's easily top 100 now. Just now he's a lineal champ. It pretty much guarantees you a top 100 spot. I would say that he, at this point, just a few fights into his heavyweight career, he's not there. In fact, before yesterday's fight, I had Tyson Fury barely in the top 40. I had him at, I think, 38. So people forget just how many great heavyweights there have been, and how many accomplished fighters there have been, including many that never touched a title, that never even got a title shot. You want to look at someone like Harry Wills or Sam Langford. I know that's going way back, but if you look at who they fought and defeated, Usyk isn't anywhere in the same galaxy as that, and those guys never even won the titles. It's nothing against Usyk. I think boxing is one of those sports. I think boxing is tricky because, like a lot of team sports, basketball and baseball and football and sports like that, where you can say, well, people are, getting bigger and stronger and more refined, and it would be hard to have some, an NBA team from the 50s, compete with even like a good college team now, but with boxing, maybe outside of the heavyweights, everyone's a middleweight is a middleweight is a middleweight, and their conditioning was probably better when they fought more often, regardless of quote modern training techniques. They certainly had more time and opportunity to practice and hone their skills. So I'd say, and because a lot of fighters from the past fought so much more often, it's hard to it's hard to build up the type of resume that would get you into that top 10 discussion. The last heavyweight to sniff the top 10 for me was Vladimir Klitschko, and even then, that's controversial because there's some people who put him up there, and some people who doesn't think he even belongs in the top 30s. He's that's just in the argument. I'm not even entirely sure I'd put him in there. So before him, it'd be Lennox Lewis and maybe Holyfield, and you're really in rarefied company, and those guys had a lot more big wins. Lennox Lewis had, I think, 14 or 15 top 10 wins. So did Vladimir. So Usyk's going to take a while. And at 37, I don't know how much he's got a lot more pressing things to worry about. You know what I mean? So at this point in his life.
Okay, cool. So considering, even Usyk's past achievements, because obviously he was at cruiserweight at one point and then unified that whole division. If he's not even he's just now breaking your top 100 for the heavyweight list, right? All-time great heavyweight list. I'm assuming, like, where'd you put him on your all-time great list, pound for pound wise?
That's a good question. I mean, again, there's a quality versus quantity thing. If all you're doing is just saying, well, this is how many top 10 fighters he defeated, this is how many Titleist champions, whatever he beat. Again, it's not a long resume, but there's some really good fighters in there, especially for the modern era, and he keeps beating them. It's kind of like Carl Froch a few years ago, where he doesn't have the deepest resume in terms of overall numbers, but there's a span. He was just fighting top 5 guys over and over and over and over. Win, lose, or draw, he was, competitive generally. Same with Usyk, and Usyk even more impressive than Froch. It's been kind of a murderer's row for him, and so I've been very impressed with Usyk. But again, it's hard to compare with the greats of the past because of the nature of the sport has changed so much. I think you could make a case for Usyk being top 100 pound for pound all time, definitely, but you're still going to have to kick off somebody who probably has a deeper resume than him, and you may make the argument he unified the cruiserweight title, he unified the heavyweight title, and that's very impressive, and that by those accomplishments by themselves help boost him a little farther. And he did it at a relatively advanced age. He's 37 now, and he just became undisputed lineal heavyweight champion of the world after having been undisputed lineal cruiserweight champion of the world a few years ago. So it's really great, but the boxing history is replete with great fighters, and it's easy to say, oh well, this guy's accomplishments are amazing, let's throw him in the top whatever list. Well, you got to kick somebody off then. Who's it going to be? Who is he actually better than? And that's the struggle. And it's not a negative reflection on Usyk at all. It's more of a positive reflection on how many great fighters there have been throughout boxing history, basically in the Queensberry era, which is now 130 plus years,
Right. And then as time goes forward, it's just that the argument in itself is like, who's going to be kicked out every single time, just get even more difficult. And
Absolutely.
then maybe even if we're going to enter the 6th belt era, right, at some point. Good God, I hope not. But I could see, obviously the argument would just further continue and exacerbate, and then it's like throwing gas on a fire. With this, I mean, is there even enough, considering his age, right, 37, he just won, he's got all the marbles, if you will. Is there even enough opposition out there, top 5 wise, that, for one, that he maybe has not already yet faced, considering that he beat Anthony Joshua back to back? Is there even enough to where he could even, I guess, edge up further if we were to categorize him in the top, like, pound for pound rankings, all-time greats? Because right now I think, like, right, it's kind of shown that anyone that you put in front of Usyk, it would be really hard to kind of bet against him. It's not impossible for him to lose, but right now he's kind of looking untouchable.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to, because if he fights anybody else, it certainly might add to his resume to a degree. But you're right, if he's the favorite, it's you give him some credit because he still beat another fighter who's trying to beat him. So that's not nothing. But it's going to be diminishing returns to a certain degree until somebody comes up that seems to be a real challenge. And there's some good fighters out there, certainly. The heavyweight division is never incredibly deep, but it's also, there are some good fighters in the division. And a lot of guys right now, either you have older guys like Deontay Wilder starting to fall out, or, maybe resurging older guys like Parker and Joshua. But again, he does nothing to prove against Joshua. Maybe Joseph Parker, but considering Joshua handled Parker pretty easily, and Parker's already had some losses, and he's probably the next best option. But it certainly wouldn't hurt Usyk to fight him, but at the same time, he doesn't really have that much to prove. And beating Parker, nobody would look at that as 20 years, 50 years down the road and saying, well, Usyk is now an all-time great because he beat Joseph Parker after becoming the lineal champs. And again, that's nothing against Parker, who has had an impressive career resurgence. And again, that's why I'd probably say he might be the next best choice. But he's I just saw somebody on Twitter probably an hour ago who made the comment, maybe the best thing for Usyk to do would be to retire. Go try to help out his home country some more. Because obviously Ukraine could use it, but he may not benefit from taking more blows to the head at this point in his life. Go out on top. But I wouldn't mind seeing him build his resume a little bit. So he'd have to go on a run to come close to cracking my top 10. Do I think he has the capability? Yeah. But if he just keeps beating top 10 opponents, eventually he would. But I don't know how long that would be, really. Probably need at least 3 or 4 more. And maybe by that point, someone big would come up to really challenge him and give him his going away fight. But would I necessarily wish that on the man? Again, at this point in his life and with everything going on, if he does it, great for him. I'd be rooting for him. But if he doesn't, he doesn't have anything more to prove for me.
Yeah, it's a little hard to see the depth to the heavyweight division. As fun as it has been in the past, I'd say 3 years. Just for guys like Usyk now, who's reached the pinnacle. I don't see really you saying Joseph Parker. That was the first person that I thought of. Maybe Wilder. I just see that he has too many tricks and too much ring generalship for Wilder. I was thinking, like you said, Joseph Parker. You just don't see really anyone else. And so my thought too was, dude just probably has to retire at this point, considering, I guess pushing to my next question for you, because I was curious, what are your thoughts on this potential rematch with him and Fury? It's scheduled for later this year in October. Do you think Fury has it in him to make these adjustments, or has Usyk's style already just proven too problematic?
That's a good question. I think that in some ways Fury showed that he is able to make adjustments. He was able to do that with Wilder, who is a very different beast, of course, to Usyk. With even in the fight itself, Fury made some adjustments, especially in those middle rounds, and he showed that he could land some shots. There was a period in those middle rounds where Usyk kept walking into his uppercut, and I was getting nervous for Usyk before he started turning things around. Fury, I would make Usyk the obvious favorite. I think Fury also definitely whipped himself into a shape that I don't know if he can duplicate, because he doesn't seem to be very consistent about that. I think his conditioning matters a lot. If he does, and after the fight, some of his comments for a little while seem to be somewhat muted about. I know their rematch is likely, and it's probably the best option for both at this point. Might be a good going away fight for both guys, and they're the obvious 1 and 2 in the weight class by far now. But also, you kind of got to know that Fury was hoping to win this and then move on to Anthony Joshua. And since it doesn't make any sense for Usyk to fight Joshua again, as much as AJ might want that. So yeah, I think the rematch could be entertaining. And I think Fury is a smart enough guy to make some changes and make it interesting again. But I don't. If I had to guess at this point, at this very early juncture, I would say that any adjustments he makes, Usyk will eventually counter, and it would end up looking the same, maybe slightly easier for Usyk again. But I don't think it's a completely useless fight either, because Fury was quite competitive, and a lot of people scored it very, very closely, and I get why. So it was definitely competitive, and Usyk only seemed to really take over by that ninth round. Really, it's as close to a likely win for Usyk that's also still interesting enough. Like I'd watch it certainly, but it doesn't draw me in quite the same way. And I think it's diminishing returns.
In terms of this past fight, not prophesizing for the future fight, right? Did this fight remind you of any previous heavyweight bout in any way, shape, or form, considering how close, competitive it was? Including, I guess, the hype around it, because again, it was for the Undisputed. I know the last time that we had one was of 24 years ago with Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield, the rematch in itself specifically. But in terms of competitiveness, does any of them do any heavyweight bouts come to your mind?
Oh man, that's actually a really good question. A lot of the fights that had kind of a similar degree of competitiveness that I can think of, the ones that really immediately come to mind, were still better, more action-oriented fights. But it definitely, there were shades of bouts like, Brewster Leohovich, which was a more entertaining fight than this, certainly, but that also had its changes in momentum and there was a knockdown. Leohovich took a knee, but he was knocked down at one point, but kind of came back and bossed the fight around later on. And I obviously there's some comparisons with Bo Holyfield, both guys making adjustments through the fight, and kind of one guy would make an adjustment and the other would then make an adjustment from that and take over for a while, and there's a lot of shifts in momentum. But they were different fights, and I don't know if what last night or yesterday was completely analogous to anything that really comes to mind. I'm sure in an hour I'll have no, it's just like this fight from 1957 or whatever. So off the top of my head, I don't really have anything specifically exactly like it. It was its own unique fight, and it definitely, it takes its place in the pantheon of, if not great, at least very good, interesting, title-changing fights. And so I think that's good enough. I think you can say it doesn't have to be exactly like another fight to still count as a pretty dang good one,
Right. No, perfect. I love that. I appreciate all the information that you've shared with us today, Hunter. I did want to leave you with this fun fact. I think I kind of mentioned it earlier, maybe not in the podcast, but to you privately. The WBC belt for this fight was blessed by Pope Francis, obviously the figurehead of the Roman Church. And I didn't think that was real when I was first looking up information for the bout overall. But the headline came across my computer, and I was like, I got to check to see if this is real. And then sure enough, there is Mr. Solomon and the Pope, and he's blessing the belt. So I just appreciate, what's that? It's such a random fact that I was like, I have to share this knowledge with everyone, especially you, Hunter, considering you're our heavyweight in-house expert, and just that the sport of boxing draws everyone in, and even, religious figureheads across the world.
That's just amazing. And I don't know if that's fun. That's probably more funny than anything else. It's probably good for the sport. Throw that in, papally sanctioned heavyweight championship. We'll go with it.
We'll find that later on a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, Hunter, thank you so much for joining me today to discuss the weekend that was, featuring Oleksandr Usyk defeating Tyson Fury to become the undisputed heavyweight lineal champion.
Absolutely.
All right. Until next time, Hunter.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's Jeff here. If you like today's episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out all of our other content on thefightcity.com. The website link can be found in our show notes. Till next time.